Michelle Tongyai says, last week Max Wild posted women. One word question. And Michelle writes, as a member of the fairer sex, I find this is probably the most thought-provoking question asked. Dare it be answered? Yes, it dare. Could prove to be very entertaining. Who knows? I might even learn something. So let's just take a look. Somebody asked about why masculine values are disappearing and how can we get them back. Somebody said women, the fair sex, and what do you have to say about that? Look, you have to start with the rafts, right? You have to start with the rafts. What is knowably true? You can deny it all you want to, but what's knowably true? What has the same force of evidentiary weight as the fact that every single raft in the Strait of Cuba is going north to capitalism, not south to socialism? That's profound truth in action. So how do you deal with the difference of the sexes and sexual roles and other stuff? You got to start looking for this fundamental biological real-world truth. The fundamental biological real-world truth about men and women, starting position is that men are far stronger than women and far faster. Now, if you're going to say, hey, I know a woman who can outrun a guy, I know some women can outrun some guys too, you're arguing the exception, which means you're wrong. Doesn't mean that every single man is faster than every single woman, but here's what it does mean. If you look at the women's times for the Olympics, if you look at the fastest track time for the women in the Olympics, if you look at the fastest time that a woman has ever run the 100-meter dash, the all-time Olympic record set just whenever the last Olympic was, the current standing record, you will find that virtually every college track team in America has several males that can beat that time. Many high schools have males that can beat that time. Many high schools. There are literally millions of men who are faster than the fastest women in the world. Millions, probably much more than that. You can't argue with that. Likewise for strength and weight. You just can't do it. As a matter of fact, hate to rain on people's parade, but since we are getting into kind of a boy-bashing era here, let's get a little bit of balance back. Hate to break this to you, folks, of both sexes, but the reason there are women's categories in the Olympics are because for virtually every sport in the Olympics, if there wasn't a women's category, there would be no women in the Olympics. If you're running 10 people, the 10 fastest individuals, every one of them will be male. The 10 strongest individuals, every one of them will be male. If you're looking at the 10 farthest javelin throwers on the planet, every one of them will be male, without exception. It's absolutely true. So you have to start there. And if you don't start there, nothing else will make sense. Feminism tries to tell you this isn't true. Feminism tries to convince you there's no difference between the sexes, but it's just not true. And where feminism starts to go wrong is when they stop saying things that make perfect sense to me and are just a fundamental function of individual human justice, which is if person A does the exact same job as person B, they should get paid the same amount of money. Couldn't agree more. But this 79 cents gap between what women supposedly make on average, 79 cents on the dollar that every man makes, is not due to the fact, sweetheart, you know what, you're just a broad and I'm just going to pay you less. That doesn't happen anymore, and it hasn't happened for 40 years. Men do earn slightly more than women in our society because men work longer hours and do more dangerous jobs. There's where that difference comes from. So where does that take you? Well, it takes you into some interesting places. When you are talking about feminism as equal rights for individuals, I'm a feminist. When you're talking about feminism as equal pay for equal work, I'm a feminist to the degree that I'm an individualist and I believe in justice. But when you start saying things that modern feminists say, that there is no difference between men and women physically, psychologically, then you're just provably wrong. You look at the records for high school boys, they're faster than the fastest women in the world. How do you answer that? You don't. You're just not allowed to ask that question. It's a misogynist question. No, it's not. There would be no women in the Olympics if there wasn't a women's category for the Olympics. So what does that tell you? Well, it tells you that men are stronger and faster than women are, among other things. And when the requirements to be a member of a police force or a fire department or a military unit go from the ability to do 40 push-ups to being able to do 3 minutes or 30 seconds of hanging from a bar, you're engineering society along the ways that society wasn't meant to be engineered. Now, here's where it starts to get interesting. Up until very recently, certainly it didn't even begin till the industrial age, so we're talking 200-300 years ago, is the very beginning. The physical weakness of women relative to men meant that there were jobs that men could do that women couldn't do. They just weren't strong enough to do it realistically, consistently, and methodically throughout society. As the industrial age comes along and machines and sources of energy other than muscle power become more and more available, turns out that a woman can drive a car as fast as a man can drive a car. There might be some difference in reflexes, but for the sake of a straight line thing, a person hitting an accelerator will make that car go as fast as the next person, and women being slightly lighter than men on general, maybe that car would even go faster with a woman behind the wheel. But the point is, you're now using an external source of energy other than muscle power. So now all of a sudden, the differences between the sexes gets considerably smaller, and in modern society, where physical strength is not terribly important for most of the jobs we do, and where the willingness to endure danger is also not terribly selected for on a daily basis. We have law and civilization and police forces and all that other stuff. Then the traditional male dominance begins to go away. The dominance of being bigger and stronger. And so these traditional roles begin to fade away. And what we're starting to see now in this post-feminist world, I think, is we're starting to see very unhappy women and very unhappy men, and that in itself is a tragedy. But I do find it really ironic, and really, actually, there's too much schadenfreude in here for me to really get angry about it, because it was a couple weeks ago now. There was an article in New Yorker magazine or some Esquire or something like this. It was written by a feminist, and basically she was complaining that men were not helping her with her carry-on bag. They weren't helping her get her carry-on bag up into the compartment or down out of the compartment. And those that did help her get her carry-on bag up or down out of the compartment hit on her, and one or two of them asked her for her number. And she said, what's the matter with you men? Why can't you just get the bag down without hitting on me for my phone number? And I'm thinking to myself, darling, what the hell do we owe you? Why should we go to the physical pain and labor of getting your bag down if you're not going to give us your phone number? And what puts you in this moral position that says that I'm obligated to get this bag down for you, use my superior strength, which has always been the key to mating success, in exchange for nothing from you? What are you giving me? Nothing. You want to make an exchange for nothing? Why don't you give me your phone number and get your own damn bag down? Reproducing is more fun than lifting heavy objects. It is if you're doing it right anyway. So, where do you get off with this attitude? It's really coming down to it, right? Because the traditional gender roles that have worked so well for so long were on some level beyond salary and opportunity. There was a certain reciprocity in there. Look, I'm not saying I don't want to go back to a world where women had a choice of being a nurse or a teacher. We have liberated 50% of the population's creativity and hard work, and it's an enormous gain. That's why we're so prosperous. Liberating women from the kitchen and so on, if they choose to do that, is grand. It's marvelous. But we're talking about something much more primal now. We're talking about this relationship where women are assuming that they can get all of the benefits and lose none of the benefits. In other words, what's in it for men anymore? Really. Jeremy Boring points out, he comes from a very traditional, he's a pastor. Jeremy points out that, look, when you were, prior to the industrial era, if you were going to be a male and you were going to be married, that meant you would have children, and the children would be your labor force. They'd work on your farm. There would be an advantage that you would get back from your monogamy, which you're not wired for at all. Biology wants you to have sex with as many partners as possible, push those genes out. So you're making a large sacrifice in favor of monogamy, which benefits the woman because she needs that male to protect the offspring. The male's biological imperative is to have as many offspring as possible. The women's biological imperative is to have offspring with the highest value male possible. So if a man is going to give up all this romping around and having fun, which we're wired to do, what do we get for it? Well, it used to be that we got kids and the kids worked for us. We got labor for it. And that meant money. It meant resources. And if you had 4 or 5 wives and you had 20 kids or 30 kids, or next thing you know, you're the chieftain of a tribe and you get to live like a little king. And so there's something in favor of all of these sacrifices. But when you don't get any deference, when you don't get any gratitude, when you don't get any benefits, and all you are expected of is to simply lift the bag into the overhead compartment, why should we do that? And women today, and you're starting to see this really in the last 10 years or so, maybe even a little bit less, women are starting to understand that men are starting to, look, what I'm trying to say is pretty simple. There's a lot about this traditional male female gender roles that are good for women, and those things are going away, and women are starting to understand that, wait, maybe this isn't the best possible deal that we thought it was. Maybe this business of us being sexually promiscuous and letting men being sexually promiscuous, maybe this actually benefits men more than women. And maybe this business of men not having to get the bag or the check anymore, maybe there's a downside to that too. Traditionally, biology is wired, and human mores and traditional cultural norms have come from this pretty simple calculation. And here's basically how it's worked. Females are more valuable than males because females can produce other humans. Males are interchangeable largely to the degree of being able to produce other humans. The females have to survive because it takes a long time to make a human. It takes 9 months to create one, and then it takes years, 7, 8, 10, 12, 14 years of nurturing to set it off. It takes a long time to build this product. And the females are the ones that have the ability to nurture that creature that both people made. That women, feminists and abortionists, say, this is my body. It's not your body. It's not your DNA. That fetus, that child inside you is not your DNA. I could take a cell from that fetus and a cell from you, and I could tell which was which, and you don't have that DNA. That DNA is unique. It's not your body. You are hosting that body. You are containing that body, but it's not you. It's not like your fingernails. It's not like your hair. It's different. So the traditional deal has been that males will give up their, largely, over large numbers of people will give up their built-in genetic desire for promiscuity in exchange for certain things. In exchange for family life, in exchange for domestic life, in exchange for comforts and all of those things, all those traditional female roles that females provided to men, that was part of the deal. You take all these things off the table, there's no reason for men to be gentlemen, there's no reason for men to be chivalrous, there's no reason for men to be married. And that hurts females worse than it hurts males. So what we find out here in places like Los Angeles, where you've got these extremely weak, narcissistic, vain, incompetent men, is that women are getting tougher and meaner and nastier, and they're unhappy. Men are unhappy. They're getting weaker and dumber and lazier, and nobody seems to be happy. And it turns out that the fish needs the bicycle after all, because as that feminist said, why won't somebody just put my bag up there? Put the bag up there yourself, sweetheart. How you liking the life without the bicycle? So it turns out that I think on balance there is a balance that can be struck here, and I think that the balance is, needless to say, women as individual human beings have a right to any occupation that they can qualify for, and that goes for men as well. If you start lowering the qualifications of jobs that require physical strength and endurance and speed in order to artificially allow women to partake of it, then you are doing something dangerous. And one of the reasons why remember how it used to be when an ambulance or a paramedic would pull up on a scene, the ambulance or the paramedic would put up on a scene. But now when a paramedic pulls up on a scene, an entire fire truck pulls up on a scene. My understanding is that's because there very likely is going to be a situation where the female paramedics are not strong enough to do what they need to do in order to get that person out of a burning building. And I don't care how much that 5'2" woman who weighs 90 pounds wants to, and I know she wants to, and it doesn't matter how much her desire is, she can't carry what a 200-pound man can. She just can't. It doesn't matter how much she wants it. I may want to be a jockey, but a jockey has to be 5 feet. I'm 6'1". I could never be a professional jockey. I can't be. It's just locked out for me. And the only way to make me a professional jockey, because I want it really, really badly, is for laws to be enforced that say that I am required to be a jockey, and everybody else has to be handicapped in order for me to have a chance to win the race. Because if a horse is carrying me at 175 pounds and some other guy at 80 pounds, that horse is going to win. So we're going to have to slow that horse down. He's going to have to carry saddlebags. Now things start to fall apart because you've gotten away from the fundamental reality of the two. So it turns out there are things that actually are a nice middle ground. I think women need to get paid exactly what men get paid for work that is exactly the same work. If men put in more time and men do more dangerous work, then they should get paid more for it, and they do, and that's the discrepancy. As far as the roles go, I think really start to deal with the physical aspect of it. You also have to deal with the psychological aspect of it. And I'm old enough now to have been enough through life to realize that men are simpler creatures than women are. And in the last 20 years or 30 years or so, that's being portrayed as a giant weakness, when in fact it is an absolute enormous strength. The simplicity of the male mind is not weakness, and it's not stupidity. It is a kind of clarity, and it's a kind of detachment that allows us to function in environments and in situations that we are better selected for. And some of those is a crisis. It's good in a crisis to be less connected emotionally to pain and suffering. It allows you to function better. It allows you to do more to prevent further harm being done. It's an advantage. It's an advantage to worry less about things. It's an advantage not to see all of the social interactions that are going on when sometimes quick and decisive action is called for. There are other times when it's a disadvantage, but there are times when it's an advantage. And this fundamental male simplicity in psychology means that we can concentrate on things and focus on things and do things in a sequential fashion rather than a parallel fashion that gives us advantages in certain circumstances, in many circumstances. And I think I mentioned this once on the show before, and I'll probably move on after this, but there was a guy, I only saw the first 15 minutes of his speech, and I'm sure he was terrific. He was a kind of a relationship motivational kind of guy. And he's speaking in front of a huge audience, hundreds and hundreds of people. He's up on stage, he's got a little headset on, and he's got two columns, two Greek commons, whether they were Doric or Ionic columns, I can't remember. But two Greek-Roman columns, and on the head of each one of these columns was a bust, a head of a man and a head of a woman. And this guy's a relationship counselor. He would go over to the men, the bust of the man's head, and he'd stand behind the bust of that man's head, and he'd say, "Okay, ladies, here's what you need to know about the male mind." This is entirely his work, had nothing to do with this. He said the male mind is like a fishing tackle box. Have you seen those little boxes? It's got all these tiny little drawers in it, and each drawer is unique, and no drawer touches anyone else, and each one has a unique thing in it. And the male mind is constructed in such a way so that male can open the box that's got his job in it, and he can look at the job, and he can consider the job and what he wants with the job, and it doesn't connect with the wife, and it doesn't connect with the kids directly. That all comes later, but right now he's looking at the job, and he's thinking about the construction of the job, and then the job goes back, and now he's got his wife box, and he talks about a little bit about that, and that goes back, and he's got his friends thing, and he's got his football box, he's got all these other things in their little compartments, and we deal with them one at a time, and we close the box, and we open up the other one. So, anyway, there's the male mind. And he said, the thing that's most remarkable about the male mind with that little box is that the box that men go to most often is nothing in. The box is empty. All the women laughed out loud, hilarious, ha ha ha, men are so stupid. And he said, no, it's a pace of quiet and peace where men can go. They can just sit someplace and let it go. And they said, goes over to the other head, and he says the female mind is like a ball of wire where everything touches everything else. So if you're going to somebody's party, how you dress is going to reflect how she feels, and has he lost his job, and how does this reflect on all these relationships and all this other stuff. So look, they're different, and you can pretend they're not, or you can respect the differences and try to construct a just society where people are good at what they're good at. So I think that's really the answer to the question. Women the fairer sex? There's no question they're the fairer sex. They're better looking than men. Their features are finer as a general rule. Used to be called the weaker sex. I don't think they're the weaker sex. They're physically weaker, emotionally stronger in some ways, emotionally weaker in others. All I'm saying is, look, this pendulum has swung too far, as always. This goes to my Kings of the Hill argument. I'd like to be at the top of the hill. So where increasing action and feminism is doing things like liberating women to make the same wage as men, I'm a feminist. But when men are punished for being men, and when these male qualities of masculinity and strength and so on are being denigrated, then you've gone too far. And the final thing I'll say about modern feminism is modern feminism fears masculinity, and they fear the negative side of masculinity. They fear the violence and they fear the aggression, and rightfully so. Those are things to fear. Virtually all of the violent crime and rape and all these other things, virtually all of that is propagated by males. And so feminists see this male aggression and violence, and they think the answer is to eliminate male aggression and violence. But that's not the answer, because all you will do is eliminate aggression and the ability to be violent among the men that you can get in touch with. There will always be men from over the hill in some other tribe that doesn't have your fabulous sense of moral evolution, and those men won't have any inhibitions about strength and violence. They're going to come over and they're going to kill your men very quickly, because they're going to be very weak, and they're going to be very slow and stupid and scared, because you made them that way. And nobody taught them how to be brave, and no one taught them how to be tough. And so they're going to come over the hill, and they're going to kill all of your men, and then they're going to do to you the things that you always feared in the first place. The answer to bad men and bad masculinity is not no masculinity. The answer to bad men and the bad traits of masculinity are good men. And if you don't make good men, then you've got nothing to defend yourself against bad men. It's just that simple. Just that simple. You have to create good men. Good men will defend you against bad men. And weak men won't. Female men won't. So, there you go. Do one more.